So without further ado, I'm really happy to introduce Kimberly Dillon. She's the founder of Frigg, a new hemp-derived CBD wellness line of hair and skin products. Kimberly was named a brand star by Adweek for her story-driven approach to branding, and she was the former chief marketing officer of Papa & Barkley, a startup that she helped grow to a $30 million business in just 2.5 years, and whose products are number 1 and 2 in their respective categories. Sharing the stage with Kimberly today is Charlie Cangialosi, Chief Operating Officer at Old Pal. Charlie has experience working at leading distribution and manufacturing operations in California, including Kiva, Loudpack, and Blue Distro. And he brings to the cannabis industry a deep experience in the craft and national beer industry. At Old Pal, Charlie has helped expand operations to work with roughly 100 cultivators in California, Nevada, Washington, Florida, and Michigan to stock their products on shelves in more than 350 dispensaries. So this will be a 30-minute one-on-one conversation between Charlie and Kimberly about white labeling, brand building, and multi-state growth. So I'll let you both take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Well, we're going to get kicking off. I'm going to kick off first. I'm going to ask Charlie the very first question. You obviously have like this deep expertise in beer and was like an early mover in the space. So I would love to hear what you took from the beer industry into cannabis in those early years, and then walk me through to where you are today.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. And, I've been in cannabis now for 6 years, and I always tell everybody that when I got liberated from the beer industry, it was just an amazing experience because I finally got to get reinvigorated and re-energized in such a exciting new industry. It's obviously adult use here in California, and walked into a great organization over at Kiva. And the interesting part about those sort of early days was everybody was just trying to figure it out, right? And early days is not a really good phrase to use. It was just 5-6 years ago, but in this industry, that's like decades. And as everybody's trying to figure it out, having a little bit of a background in how to get a product from A to B to C, really helped us and led to a lot of success at Kiva as we developed the distribution component of their business and brought in a portfolio of partners to really kind of work with retailers. So there's all that sort of traditional, CPG experience that is very applicable to what we're all doing now, right? Which is getting our babies, our brands, to the people that can utilize them most, which is our consumers. And how you do that and how you approach and work and collaborate with your retailers to achieve those goals is really important. So having a little bit of structure and giving people some guidelines to point them in the right direction has been, very, very successful and useful in my experience as we've kind of worked on a bunch of different brands here over the last few years. Now, Kimberly, what about you? Like, you've had the big experience of being, with Papa and Barkley's, and then now moving into your own venture. What has your experience been like, over the last few years?
Yeah, so I know that I have some microphone issues, so I'm going to answer this question on my regular, and then I'll switch over to a phone after this. But I think in the early days, it really wasn't around brand building. It was really like, let's get to shelf. And it was really like, oh, okay, we have a somewhat better product. And then the step change was packaging. So now we have pretty packaging. And then, we have a cool social account. And it was like little bits of pieces that are about brand building, but not really coming out of the gate with intentionality from a 360 approach.
Right.
And I think now we are starting to see like holistic brand building, which is also evolving, right? Like, I think now consumers have been shifted so drastically by 2020 in terms of what they expect from a brand, the types of stories they want to hear, the types of transparency they want to be a part of and want to know what you stand for. So I think that's not cannabis specific, but I think what brands have to do to show up is fundamentally different. And I think
Right.
cannabis has been a little bit slower in terms of like, reaching that task. But in the original days, I really think it was, oh, look, pretty packaging, or oh, cool, banging social accounts, our events, without thinking about it from like a 360 approach. Like even customer
Right.
service is part of your branding. So I'm really excited to see that evolution with these brands coming on deck now about this sort of holistic approach to branding.
Yeah, and I can tell you again from my past experience and my current experience, that's not something unique to cannabis, right? I mean, the roadside is littered with craft beer brands that thought they were the next big thing. And the one thing that a lot of those brands, and you see that now here in the cannabis space, is those brands just lost touch with who they were, but also a lot of them didn't even know who they were. And they all had a little bit of chutzpah, so to speak, that they just kind of showed up and like, here it is, go for it, you'll love it. And then they would disappear. And if you don't have passion about your brand and you can't tell the story like we just heard in the prior conversation, then you're doomed to fail, right? And that's not something, like I said, that's unique to this space. It's across every category of everything that anybody ever purchases, because you have to build that connection with your consumer. And I think that kind of leads a little. Go ahead, Kimberly. You got a thought on that? I can't hear you.
I'm not even sure where we are on the question thing, but I was intrigued because craft beer wasn't ubiquitous like 10 or 15
Right.
years ago, right? Like it felt very indie and you felt like you were supporting local. And then over
Right.
time, the big guys kind of came in and you didn't realize what was indie versus not. Is there any sort of lessons in that for the cannabis, or any lessons from craft beer that you think is applicable to building a brand today?
Yeah, I think the thing that's applicable to it is maintaining that connection. The reason a lot of those folks failed is as they tried to expand out into new markets, like I said, they just like showed up and disappeared. And I think that's something that we've all learned in this industry too, is like when you go to a new market, you have to make the investment with your partner in that market to make your brand successful. And if you don't make that investment, and again, just show up and like throw your brand out there, you're just burning money. And if you want to burn money, just send it to me because I got 3 kids in college. I could use it. But yeah, you gotta maintain that connection. You got to put people in that marketplace, and you got to build those connections one by one with every retailer and with every consumer, so that people get aligned and entrenched with your brand, so that you can maintain your success and growth path.
That.
So, like Kimberly, as you moved into your new venture, what are some of the things that you're seeing as you're trying to expand your brand out and license it in other markets? What are some of the things that you look for in a partner when you're, expanding? We can't hear you again.
I don't know why I keep doing that. So moving into the CBD space has been really fascinating because we're taking a dual approach. So one is brand building and having that direct conversation with our consumer. And so that's direct to consumer. But then it's also figuring out all the different channels we want to play in. Right. And specifically how then to build the brand building with our retail partners, but then with their retail agents, which is very similar to like the bud tender situation. But what's interesting is that there's a lot more channels available on the hemp side. Right. And so it's about being choiceful about which channels I want to play in. Do I want to play in natural? And natural is an interesting category for That consumer is always trying new things and tends to be a lot of education. Do I want to play in mass where there is no education? Like everything has to happen from like just my packaging, but man, volumes. Do I want to go specialty retail, which is a lot of labor and it's very fragmented, but like the education and the story will come through. And so the thinking for us, we lost just in the last 2 months, is really thinking about channel dynamics, which is not which wasn't as applicable to me in cannabis on the regulated side, because it was like, if there's 700 dispensaries, let's go down the list, go, run. Now it's thinking through channel conflict. And also there's an interesting dynamic of exclusivity with a lot of these large retailers. They don't want you to be in other channels. They don't want you to be in other retailers. So it's interesting to think about how you tell that brand story to consumers, to your partners, and to all the gatekeepers along the way. So while it's interesting that hemp opens up a lot of doors, it is a more complicated sort of process that's often driven by the retailers. We actually had a call with a pretty large retailer. I wasn't seeking it out, not ready. And the demands were 48 pages.
Right.
And so,
you must have been talking to Whole Foods.
You're like, and if it's easy for you to lose sight of what you want.
Right.
And so it's really about owning your vision and owning your story and getting that traction first. So the challenges are a little bit different, but exciting.
Yeah, no, I get a lot of calls from my old world for people who have transitioned into doing hemp-based products, or even people at craft breweries are looking to do a CBD beverage, and they struggle with that same dynamic. It's like, what channel is my product targeted towards, and how do I get in there, and all those dynamics. It is a completely different world, filled with all sorts of challenges. So yeah, that's super exciting.
How you think for like new brands, how you think about sort of KPIs and revenue and sort of what success looks like. So imagine it's year one, what does success look like in terms of marketing for you, in the sense that sometimes it's been about revenue and growth and you're like, oh, we're a rocket ship.
Right.
I think now we're kind of like, profitability, maybe. Yeah. Maybe you don't think about that about year one, but I would love to hear your mindset. Year one, new cannabis brand today in California. What would success look like when that year's over?
Well, I think success means different things to different people, right? And I think that's where a lot of people fail, because they set a bar that's way, way too high for what's achievable. And then they never achieve that success because they can't get there. So I think you have to be very, very thoughtful about what that success looks like. So for me, the simplest way to look at this from a new product launch is stores. How many locations can I get into? Because if I can build out my pipeline, right, and get my products on as many shelves as I can support from a capacity standpoint, then that will determine if we're successful or not. Because I think a lot of people made the fatal error of building too much capacity and not having the demand for it, right? And then a few people probably didn't have enough capacity because all of a sudden they hit a hot brand. And that's a balancing act. So that's the struggle that a lot of people have. But again, I think just setting a target on the location that you want to focus on, which I think California, for its faults in the way the stores are laid out, it really is 5 or 6 micro markets that you can go and attack. So if I'm LA based, I'm going after the West Side and I'm going to grow out from that hub, right? If I'm in Oakland, I'm growing out from Oakland, right? I'm not going to extend myself and to the point where I can't meet the needs of my retailers by having 3 shops in San Diego and 2 in Orange County and 5 in LA and 4 in Sacramento, right? There's no way that you can functionally manage and build those relationships with those retailers, because if you don't support your retailers, there will never be success. So, you know, that's the way I think people need to look at it, is like, what can I honestly achieve, and then don't overpromise and underdeliver. You know, do it the other way around.
Yeah, and I think it's a marriage between sales and marketing, right? I feel like sometimes those can be in silos, but really, they're right together.
Yeah, no, I mean, there is that balance, right? I think, like, how do you look at it on the hemp CBD side of the business? You kind of inferred it a little bit, but I think, do you see that being a stronger pull market versus a push market, right? I think, like in cannabis, in a regulated situation, it's really about the push, getting it into those stores. That's what I was just talking about. But do you see it from that standpoint, or do you think it's more about
hemp? That was the problem, except I think the bigger problem was this thing called the pandemic. Like, who's going into these stores?
Well, yeah. Besides that, it's
and
2021.
But I think it's a healthy balance. I'm personally not a purist, so I know that we've been this phase of like DTC, and we've seen all these brands like Hims and Hers and Casper, etc.
Yeah,
that's an incredibly expensive model that like was great when you're the first mover, but subsequently, it's a lot harder. I mean, it's a lot more expensive to like just be owning your traffic through Facebook ads, etc. And interestingly enough, because platforms like Shopify have like democratized e-com in some ways, the competition in DTC is massive. Put a commodity thing in a very pretty box, get some sans serif font, and like you're off to the races. And so it's an incredibly competitive market. And so it's a balance between, I want to own a direct conversation with like my top fans, but also I want retail partners, because they ultimately have way more eyeballs than I will ever have. And if they can tell that story and contextually tell that story. So today I would have to find, like, I can do this through Facebook or paid ads, et cetera, and find you. And you may be going between Instagram, the election, et cetera, and then buy hair oil, maybe. Right. Or you could be in a Sephora at the hair section. Not you.
I'm not buying any hair oil, Kimberly.
Although you should take care of your scalp. We can talk about it.
It's like I see who are like clapping, like
self-care is very important.
You guys all got hair.
As is sunscreen. And so, but like if that same consumer was in a Sephora, she's buying something.
Right.
And so for me, it's a balance, and it's an omni-channel strategy. So it is thinking about what are the key channels retail, and then also DTC. Obviously, I would love more DTC because margins, right? But I can't come out the gate focusing on margins. I also have to, it's a balance. And so brand awareness is my bigger focus at the moment than having the best margin possible.
So how do you look at it to build that and maintain that trust with those DTC consumers?
Yeah. So it's about relationships and loyalty, and really knowing, having a two-way conversation. Like one small thing that we did, we're a very small brand. We launched 3 SKUs, but we put in a survey as part of our checkout flow of like what you want to see next.
Okay.
Pretty much we've had an 80% response rate to that survey. It's just one question. And so that's helping us with our product roadmap. And then when people have written like feedback, we follow back up with them and say, okay, you said you wanted an eye cream. Let's talk about it. And so we're trying to build a co-creation community where we're building this together. What are the nonprofits you want us to support? So it's very collective on that side. quite frankly, we're doing that with our retail partners as well.
Right.
So what is the white space that we fit for you in terms of products, or what is the white space we fit in terms of what customer can we go after with our products for you? So actually, it really is collaboration all across the board. And at the end of the day, if 2020 taught me anything, everything's about relationship. Even if I don't know you and you're like a pixel somewhere, it is all about relationships.
Right.
Is my general sort of perspective.
Yeah, no, it always is and always has been about relationships. So.
But that being said, like obviously, like if we compare it to dating, it's easier when that person's like right in front of you and you can see them. And then long distance, it has more challenges. So that's akin to in cannabis, like you're coming in California, but then you need to grow and scale. And you're like, okay, I'm coming for you, Illinois. I'm coming for you, Massachusetts. How do you think about these long distance relationships that you have to now establish and expand?
Yeah, again, the way we approach it, in a way I've always approached it throughout my career, is having someone local, right? You gotta, if you're going to Illinois, you have to have a brand represent someone that is your employee in that marketplace. Now, depending upon the dynamics, you can have someone who's managing multiple states, especially in that part of the country where, the geographies are a little bit tighter. But you need somebody there working with your partner to ensure really three things. One, that your quality and your specs are being met, because quality is everything, right? That's the quickest way to lose a consumer. One, implementing your marketing on that local level, and then working to help, create that push and working with the salespeople. So yeah, that's what it comes down to. And again, it is challenging to do that from time to time. But then, using and utilizing technology can help, and just getting on really good standard cadences of check-ins and talking with people and seeing what they need from your end to, support what, the total goals are.
Yeah.
So that's how we kind of approach it.
Awesome.
Yeah. How are we doing on time?
Around margins. I think we started a little bit late. So someone, whoever manages can just drop in how many minutes we have left. That'd be great. As it relates to margins, how I thought about it was I knew the target margins I wanted to hit on DTC. And then I knew what I was comfortable, and I modeled it out, because at the end of the day, like, it's about numbers. So I then just blended like what I would be willing to accept in year one for my other channels, knowing it'll take my overall margin down. But then in year two, on year three, I can start to think about like how I raise that margin up once I have sort of more leverage. So that is how I thought about margins. Also, I'll just give a little wink. Beauty has very high margins.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, well done. Yeah, we look at it slightly differently, because we always assess the value of the market, right? So if it's a smaller market, it might be emerging, and it's a great way for you to build your brand because it builds consumer awareness, right? And it shows your ability to extend that brand across geography. So you may be willing to take a slightly smaller margin in that state because of the benefit it gives you to the overall business, but also the expansion of your brand. So those are also a lot of considerations I think people need to take into consideration again when they're looking at that expansion, because if you get locked in on a number, it might not be achievable in Ohio or Florida because of a bunch of market dynamics. But if you're in Florida and eventually that's going to be, the third largest market in the country, it might be worth taking a little bit less now for the payoff, for lack of a phrase, later on. So I think you have to balance all of those different dynamics.
I 1,000% agree with you, because not looking at margin, but brand awareness. One of the small things I've realized is like, I live in LA, right? Like cannabis is over, CBD is over. Now we're on shrooms, and I'm sure there's something else that I don't even know we're doing because I'm behind. But one of the things I found interesting was there's a whole country out there, and man, in Texas and Chicago and Kansas, we are like the best thing popping. Like we are blowing minds.
Yep.
And so it's interesting that sometimes the approach is like, let me go in my own backyard, but it's very competitive here. And it's been refreshing to remind myself, like, this is not popping in Kansas. And there's this like an open slate as it relates to hemp and CBD. And even when we think about CBD in its 50 state, it really has been coastal. It has been amazing to see the interior states and like how little they know and how incredibly excited they are.
Yeah.
So remembering the timeline of like, whatever I'm over is popping somewhere else.
Yeah, I learned that very, very early on. I was in action sports and they did trade shows. It's always in San Diego and there'd be one in Orlando. So you do the one in the spring in San Diego, and then you'd go to the fall show the next year in Florida, and you'd see everything that happened in California in 6 months earlier. It's like there was always that trailing factor. So that was kind of one of my early ahas, like, oh yeah, like you just said, it's like we all get in our little bubble in California sometimes, which is a huge fault, and you have to be aware of everybody's at a different point in the cycle of discovery, right? With CBD, hemp products, or cannabis, THC products, whatever it might be. So it might have been old news 2 years ago in California, but it's brand new in Kansas.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it fun.
2 minutes left, so perhaps we should end with our pithy statements. No pressure.
Uh-oh. You go first then.
Oh, damn. I didn't prepare. I guess my pithy statement is being intentional. Being intentional in how you're building your business and how you're building your brand. And sometimes it's very easy to get into a very reactionary state. It's also very easy to copy what is happening. But I think our last speaker sort of spoke to it. Whatever you're called to do, like, it's not going to be a trend. Like if you're reading about it in a bunch of newsletters on the website, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
It will be, it's lonely to like be that visionary. So I think that's one, is like, you should not see a lot of people around you with the same exact vision or thought or approach initially. It'll be kind of lonely. And I think the second is like, but intentionally knowing that, intentionally building the business and the brand that you want, and being intentional in everything that you do instead of reacting. And I think in cannabis, it's very easy to react. And I think it's also very easy to be in this Me Too movement. Not me, I don't mean that. I mean like in the copy movement. And so like getting out of that and being like, what are we standing for? What are we doing? I think will be the key in winning in the future.
Yeah, and for me, it's about authenticity, and it's being authentic to yourself and to your brand vision, and authentic to all your partners who are there to help support you with that, right? If you're just authentic and honest and keep moving down that path, and like you said, put the blinders on, don't get distracted by what everybody else might be doing, you're going to be coming out ahead 9 times out of 10. If you got ADD and like you said, you're like grasping at every straw, you're done. But I think that's where this industry has been so cool over the last, decade or so, and half a decade that I've been in it, is like, it feels very much like a true community. And there's always outside pressures that come in and pull and tug on us all, but who, like what you've done with this format, I think just reinforces this sort of community aspect. And I think that's the most authentic thing in the world. And that's what's I found so cool about this whole experience that I've had personally, and I think we all have collectively had. So yeah, it's been fun.
Well, it's been
Continue,
an
it will be.
honor to enter.
Yeah,
it's been an honor to have this chat with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.